Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is to deal with the minutes for our May the 26th meeting. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any comment or discussion on the minutes? If not, then I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. The next item is for citizen comments on items that are not on the agenda tonight. This is an item that allows anybody, any of the citizens of Franklin, to come to the lectern and to be heard on items that are not included on our agenda tonight. Are there any citizens that would like to make comments tonight? Seeing none, we'll move along. Catherine, announcements tonight?
We have no announcements.
No announcements, okay. Item 5 is the vote to place non-agenda items on the agenda. Are there any items that any commissioners would like to have placed on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move along. Item 6 is to deal with the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are deemed by the Planning Commission to be non-controversial and routine in nature. We'll approve those items by one motion. The consent agenda is before you. Items 7 through 31, and items 32 and 32 by consent will be votes to defer those items by request from the applicant. Item 34 is a consent item, then item 38 is a consent item. Does anybody wish to take an item off the consent agenda? Seeing none, then we'll vote for approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approval of the consent agenda with staff comments, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So the first item then on non-consent will be item number 35.
Mr. Chairman, this is a item having to do with the floodway fringe overlay district, and primarily with the regulations that mirror the state regulations for floodway and floodway fringe areas. It is primarily has to do with the construction requirements associated with construction in a floodway or floodway fringe area, and is, again, necessary for us to meet the requirements of the flood insurance program and to comply with state regulations. It is pretty much boilerplate language.
Okay. Is there a member of the public that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, then staff. The commission, does anybody have an issue with this item, or?
I'm the one probably
Go ahead,
that
Ann.
wants to say something about this. I know that we're needing to make some changes to our zoning text because we will need to conform more closely to the state requirements. However, by conforming just to the state requirements, we are changing fundamentally what I think the floodplain ordinance has been about in Franklin since we came under the flood program in 1976. We have, and I think I know the history of this because I can tell you the first time I ever spoke before the board of mayor and aldermen, it was about the floodplain. We have always had an ordinance that was stricter than the minimum requirements. And this ordinance as written here is exactly the minimum requirement to stay in the flood program. And so I would like for us to have some discussion about, do we, is that what we want to do? Do we want to just go to a less stringent requirements and just go to the minimum requirements. I know some of the other areas, I know Metro is different. The one main thing that I know about is that it requires any building in the floodplain to be 5 feet above the minimum elevation there. And but there's several other things in here, and I'd really like to hear what anyone else has to say. My thought after really going over this again pretty carefully today is that I would like to see this discussed at one of the joint workshops, because as I say, to me it is a fundamental change in what we have always had. Our current regulations are more stringent than this, and to me that would be a fundamental change, and I would oppose that, would have opposed it 30 years ago, I guess, but certainly since we had the extensive flood that we had a year ago, I don't want us to see. I do not want Franklin to go to the minimum requirements.
Well, I guess staff isn't. Well, my question would be, just to be sure, this standard is less stringent than what we currently have?
We would continue to have the standards in terms of uses in the FFO and the FWO. So those would continue to be in place. They would continue to be what regulates the floodway fringe and the floodway overlay zone until, unless they were changed in a different type format. These standards are primarily construction standards for when there is construction meeting those requirements of the FFO in floodplain areas. What Alderman Peterson is correct in saying that this particular standard only requires 1 foot, because 1 foot is the state minimum. However, that certainly is open for discussion as well, but it doesn't change the uses that are currently allowed.
Well, I guess then my next question would be, I know it's pretty much boilerplate and there's a lot to it. Does staff not recommend that we keep it? Was it now? Is it 5 or 7? How far above is it now?
It's 1 foot, except that there's some other things that we have. If you look at our zoning ordinance now, and it talks about what the regulations in the floodplain are, it also says that there will not be building permitted on a lot that's in the floodplain, a new lot that's in the floodplain. What you can do is you can cut off that part of it that's in the floodplain and make it an unbuildable lot, and so that your lot that the structure is on is out of the floodplain.
Okay, because question for you, I just want to make sure, because I know we've had so many iterations of this, have a little bit of experience with this. Over on Green Street, we had massive flooding and all that. My dad and I built a house like in 1994, and it's huge, and it's way out. Of course, we were kind of disturbed we had to do that. Now we're just really glad. So question for you, the house that we have now that sets up, I think maybe it's about 5 feet, almost to my head where the blocks end. Right now in the city of Franklin, could we still build on that lot in Green Street? It was in the 100-year floodplain. We could, correct? Okay. Would it still have to be as high as it is now? Okay. That was I got you.
Even with this?
Even with this?
But it's a foot above floodplain.
Yeah.
So you gotta get there first.
And then
you've got to
one
build it
more
up
foot.
out of there.
Okay.
Yeah, and of course, this board can decide to make it 2 feet or 3 feet or whatever you're comfortable with.
And as I say, I think that's something that needs to be discussed, because, and not only Metro, but I had a note here about some other county or city in the area that also had a higher level. But again, it's not just that. If you go in there, then it talks about, maybe I should say, compared to what our floodplain says now, it basically says in the floodway overlay district, Now, the floodway, you can have a passive park, golf course, open space, temporary uses, infrastructure in accordance with the stormwater management ordinance or designated floodplain, stormwater authority. If you look in here, it says you can have other structures in there. So to me, it is permitting more than what our ordinance permits right now. And the same, and in fact, it says in here, now this, I'm reading from the current ordinance, buildable lots subdivided or established after July 1, 2008 shall not be located within or contain any portion of the floodway district, any portion of subdivision within the floodway overlay district shall remain as open space or be noted on the plat as a non-buildable lot. Where if you look in here, this does have construction standards where you can build in the floodway and the flood fringe. And I'm still, to tell you the truth, I'm still not sure, whenever they talk about these other things here, I couldn't tell which one was the floodway fringe. I mean, the floodway, I think the flood fringe was maybe AE. Somebody needs to tell me.
It's not differentiated. The flood zone, AE zone, would include both the floodway and the floodplain or the floodway fringe.
I thought it had to be.
And it's really, it's a function of the insurance and the rate structure for your insurance. If you're in an AE zone and you're 1 foot above the base flood elevation, then you're at a preferred risk level and your insurance will be cheaper. But it's not going to be differentiated with respect to the floodway. FEMA does allow construction in the floodway if you can document that construction won't cause an adverse impact. It won't raise. You have to demonstrate a no-rise, do an actual hydraulic study to show that by putting that building in the floodway, it won't cause the water to be higher than it otherwise would have been without the building in that location. And if you've got a big, wide floodway, it's often easy to demonstrate that. So it just depends on the specific conditions on the creek at the location of that structure is being proposed to be built.
And go ahead.
Is the insurance cheaper each foot over the minimum?
Each foot higher than the base flood elevation it gets, until the preferred rate is like less than $300 a year.
It's pretty expensive.
So it's pretty cheap if you're in a preferred rate.
Okay.
But as you fall to that base flood or below that base flood, it gets
higher.
significantly more expensive.
Another,
Actually.
I mean, and we do make a differentiation between the floodway and the floodway fringe. And my understanding, and this is from years ago, is that the floodway was supposed, well, in fact, I think it even says in here, it is the area where the flow of water, I mean, you know, kind of, it's the accommodation for the water of the stream, river, or whatever you have. Right. Whereas the flood fringe, and from my old understanding of this, was supposed to be more or less backwater or backup water or something like that. Well, if you look at how the Harpeth River comes through, it is so winding and everything, and I know from experience, it cuts across. Once it gets up to a certain height, it cuts across. And so you are, even though you may not be in the part that is designated for the flow of the river, you are in the current. And as I say, I can speak from personal experience about that. And so for that reason, and because we have that situation here, which is not true for every floodplain in every location. It is, to me, something that needs to be discussed. And as I say, this is definitely the minimum standard. And I know that for the years since 1976, we have not adhered to only the minimum standard.
So are you making a motion to defer?
Well, I would make a motion to
Second.
defer and put this on perhaps a workshop, if that suits, or let the staff decide about that.
And one question that I would have also that have answered, because what I was looking is that in order to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, that, you know, we have to adopt certain things. But just to be clear on that, it doesn't prevent us from modifying, is that correct? As long as we meet the minimums?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to
You
be
can,
sure.
you can always go
To make sure.
stricter than the
You can go
minimum.
more strict than
Yeah.
nine, go less strict.
Less
Right.
strict. Yeah.
Okay, so we
yes.
have a motion to defer to maybe the next work session, or, okay. And we have a second on that motion. Is there any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, item number 36. Item number 36 is, well, Catherine, you want
We
to
would
lead that?
ask that that item and the item following it be deferred as well.
Okay, so item 36
So moved.
and
And
item
37.
37.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to defer also items number 36 and 37. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And item 39,
Mr. Chairman, this is a land use plan amendment. It is basically an amendment for vehicle corridors, greenway networks, and mass transit options that are part of our land use plan. We have put all of these various components together from other plans. There is no change in any of these land use items. It is just a consolidation of plans from other locations into our land use plan.
okay. Is there anybody from the public wish to speak to this item? Seeing none, we have a motion for
Second.
approved and a second. Is there any discussion?
The only discussion that I have is that, you know, it states that this is going to require a long-term commitment. A long-term commitment to the ideas of it sound good to me. I don't know that I want to say that we're going to spend a lot of money to do it from the city. You know, very well we may some, but I mean, you know, I can remember some enhancement project that was said to be only $5 million a year for 20 years, you know, and that's a part of this. So I just want to be clear on that. The other thing is that on some of them, like Columbia Avenue, it really just talks about that piece of Columbia Avenue that's like inside McHatcher. And there's more to that, although some of that is just out in the UGB. But that was the only real comment that I had, other than I don't want to commit to spending a lot of money, but based on this.
Okay. Any other comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting is adjourned.